Okay.
There we go.
There, Owen's got it. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order for the City of Saratoga Springs, February 11th, 2025 at 6:02 PM. This is a joint City Council and Planning Commission work session this evening. We'll do a roll call through the council. Commissioner Burns, the chair, has been excused tonight. After I do the roll call for the council, we'll have Vice Chair Commissioner Doug Wilden do a roll call for the Planning Commission. Present tonight, we have Councilwoman Barton, Councilman Karn, Councilman McComber, Councilman Wadman, Councilman Wildem. So we do have a quorum for the council this evening.
This is Mike on.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Present are 5 commissioners: Wilden, Karn, Hill, Mangum, Miles, and those that are not here, absent, is Sprosty, Burns, and Commissioner Mann.
And Commissioner Matt's coming.
She is great, thank you.
Okay. We will go on to the work session this evening. We have a community plan concept for the Sitla Larry H. Miller project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, planning commissioners, appreciate the time.
Is Mike on?
My name is Harold. Administration. Let me make sure I'm speaking to the mic clearly. Thank you. The Trust Lands Administration, I could talk for an hour, about what we do, how we do it, et cetera, but hopefully you're somewhat familiar with it, so I'll hit maybe just some of the high points, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. The agency was founded in 1994, and we manage the state's trust lands that were granted to as part of our constitutional mandate coming into the Union. We're the second largest landowner in the state of Utah, currently managing over 3.4 million surface acres and an additional million acres of severed mineral estate. A key thing to remember and keep in mind is that trust lands are not public lands. They're set aside for a specific purpose and specifically for our beneficiaries. Approximately 96% of the beneficiary estate hold goes to the public school system of Utah. The other 11 beneficiaries are just a sample: the University of Utah, Utah State University, the School of Mines, School for the Deaf and Blind, et cetera. Those are all laid out in the Constitution, and we have a very set, specific mandate about how we go about managing those lands. Our mission is to enhance the value of those trust lands and maximizing the economic returns to our beneficiaries. That's pretty obvious in the way that the administration and the fund has been able to grow. When we were established in 1994, there was only approximately $50 million in the permanent fund. So after 100 years from statehood until 94, only $50 million have been set aside in the trust. That number is now over $3.5 billion. So we feel very strongly that what we do benefits the School Kids Utah and our beneficiaries. One of the things we do with our properties, and we'll get into the details of the Saratoga Springs project, is we try and find great partners. Approximately 1% of the total property the trust has, we manage in what we call our development portfolio. And that's essentially properties that are on the verge or ready to be developed in a traditional real estate development scenario versus other properties that we manage for mineral resources or oil and gas resources or agricultural and grazing resources, or we also do solar energy type projects. The next slide, please. As I mentioned, we've generated over $1.96 billion to the beneficiaries since '96, and 96% of that's for public education. 560,000 acres have been preserved and protected. We don't just go about mismanaging those lands. We take a very active role in trying to manage the properties all across the state. And specifically to what does that mean to Saratoga Springs? Approximately $2 million have been given to Saratoga schools within Saratoga Springs in the last several years. 96% of our revenue, as I mentioned, goes to public education. So that's a little bit about us. Let me tell you a little bit about the Saratoga Springs property. That's approximately 1,200 acres that it has been, for the most part, with the public school kids. There is a small sliver that is part of Utah State University. So this is a split beneficiary type project, but those will be the two beneficiaries on this project. This property has been designated in the development group for quite a while, as we started seeing Saratoga Springs growing from the city's initial onset. But we've had some historic issues with this property that I'm sure the city is very familiar with. The existing clay mines that were there since the 50s, the construction debris landfill that's been in place, and actually the explosives plants that were on the property since even before the city was formed. All of those historic issues have certainly caused some consternation to the city, and frankly consternation for us as to how to phase those properties or those revenue generation leases out and move those into a way for us to maximize return and generate revenue that makes sense for the community. And that's really what we've tried to do. So we have spent, since I've been with the trust over 13 years now, this was one of the first properties I was assigned to. For 13 years, I've been working with various planning groups, working with city staff, working with engineers, trying to make sure we're master planning and thinking about this property holistically. But what we do is we go through a process where we interview development partners. And when we felt this property was right to bring a development partner on, that's exactly what we did. We put out an RFP. We received a lot of interest from the development community. I want to say we had 8 to 10 different responses. We went through a fairly selective 4 to 5 month process interviewing those partners, and finally settled on the group you see before you. We think that the Larry H. Miller Real Estate Group is or will be a fantastic partner not only for the trust, but shares our vision of what we want to be able to create a really key place for the community and have this property become a real asset to the community. This property, as I'm sure you're aware, has been under development pressures, as all of Wasatch Front is, and there's a lot of concerns with this property as to how you can bring in the Foothill Corridor, how you can remediate those previous historic uses on the property. But without getting into too much detail, I think it's better that maybe I be quiet and we'll let my team speak, because they're the ones who are experts in this. So I'd like to introduce Brad Holmes, the president of Larry H. Miller Real Estate.
Thank you, and we're thankful to be here today. I am the president of Larry H. Miller Real Estate. We do all the real estate development for the Miller family. I've worked for the Miller family for about 13 years, and I think this is really exciting to be here and to talk a little bit about what we do. And with me today is Stephen James and Ginger Romerell, and they've really had the vision for what this property can be. First of all, I'm just thankful for the opportunity to present, and then also would like to thank the residents of Saratoga Springs. A couple of months ago, we had this great opportunity to bring residents together and to take feedback at Mountain Creek Middle School, and we really pride ourselves in that. When we got into master planning development, and we did that through the acquisition of Daybreak in South Jordan 4 years ago, it's when we knew we were going to be changing some of the focus of the organization, and we acquired Daybreak. And the first thing we said as a group is we wanted to be good community partners, and we wanted to go on a listening tour. And so we started to meet with the city, school district, other leaders, the county, to try and really understand what the needs were. And something we learned quickly was that there was always a need for collaboration. And frankly, in some instances out in Daybreak, there was a need to slow down and to reset what was happening. Development can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming to cities. It can be overwhelming to school districts. It can be overwhelming for transportation. And so since we've owned Daybreak, the year we bought it, Daybreak did about 1,300 housing permits. And since then, we haven't pulled more than 400 per year. We've wanted to really make sure that our planning process is right and that it's not overwhelming, because we're about creating great places. And we think doing the right thing is really the advantage that we have as a developer. I will say I'm actually the raised in the home building business. And so I can say this, we have a lot of home builders in the state of Utah. We don't have as many land planners. We don't have as many opportunities to master plan. And so when we had the opportunity to partner with the Trust Lands Administration on this, we got really excited because we think planning properly helps growth solve problems and not create problems. And that's really what we're all about. Our approach in all of the Miller organization, the reason we come to work every day is we want to enrich lives. I get really excited about that when I think about what we can do from a real estate perspective. Put people in housing, help them develop a net worth, help create safe communities, help create communities where there's wonderful schools for our children to be raised in. And so when we wake up every day and we think about this project and other projects, that's really what we're here for. Today, we want to focus on what we think the opportunities are. We think there's a path forward that will provide a really great project for Saratoga Springs and the residents. We think there's an opportunity to help with traffic, to look at Mountain View Corridor, to look at connections there, to see how this plan can help with north-south connectivity. It's 1,200 acres. There's a lot of development there, and we think that there's an opportunity to look at that and how we move traffic. We need to be smart with what requirements we have. There's money for water tanks, there's money for transportation, and I think when we look at that, and we'll explain this, and not in a vacuum, but holistically, we can find that we can move dollars around and create the same infrastructure opportunities and hopefully do more good than just looking at them in a vacuum. Housing segmentation is something that we're really proud of, that we want to provide housing for what would be my children as they're looking to graduate college and to get out on their own and find affordable and attainable housing, which is really hard to do right now, but also to the resident of Saratoga Springs who's been here, who's raising their children, who has roots now in the middle school and high school. And so segmentation where buyers can move up and down in the same community, we think is a part of a resilient neighborhood. And so that's something that the plan focuses on. And something that I'm most excited about is continuing to just unlock the mountains. There's an amazing amenity package here in Saratoga Springs, and this project sits at the foothill of it. You look at Bonneville shoreline, the lake, mountains, there'll be, I think, an opportunity as we show you the plan to do that. And again, just showing that we're here, we want to listen, we want feedback, but we want to do something that will be beneficiary to the city and to bring our brand and to bring the care that the Miller family has displayed throughout the state of Utah into Saratoga Springs is something that's exciting for us. So with that, I'll let our Chief Visioning Officer, Stephen James, he's been the planner on this project and has been responsible for a lot of the good work, along with Ginger, present the project to you. Please, yeah.
For you to finish. I just want to make sure, I was actually hoping this meeting would be a little more informal, where we are all around tables, so it wasn't so formal-ish type thing, because I want this to be a very open discussion. It is a work session, so I want to just make sure that City Council, Planning Commission, city staff, that kind of stuff, please speak up, that kind of stuff. I don't want, again, I felt like this would have worked a lot better, like around tables and stuff, so we could have discussion, but I hope this discussion still works the exact same. And so please, you guys, this is what this is for. It's a work session. I want to make sure everybody's heard, staff, city council, planning commission, anything like that. During this presentation, if you have a question, please speak up. I really thought it was important for the planning commission to be here as well, because I really love you guys' opinion on everything too. And so again, even though it feels a little formal, that's not what this is. It is an informal meeting. Speak up, ask questions. That's what this is for. They're here for our feedback and for kind of our thoughts and how we want to go forward with this. So I just want to say that real quick before you started. So thanks for coming.
Great.
Let's get going and let's go. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We've received a lot of good feedback from staff already, and I think this is an opportunity to kind of present a holistic idea that we test with you to see if if it resonates. And then we want to have a conversation about what about it might align with your vision for the city. As we think about this project, which we're calling Three Canyons now, we have this big question. It's the what if, right? You know, what if this piece of land could really be seen as a regionally significant park that integrates the mountainside, and development as a way to achieve it and accomplish it. So as we think about this idea, just keep this question in the back of your mind as we flip through some of these images and slides. Just to get this on the table right off the bat, in terms of the size of the land, 1,200 acres, we believe that 1,022 of those acres are developable, and we'll talk a little bit about how we came to that conclusion. And then we're asking for 3 unit per acre average on that land. As we met with the residents of the community, here are some of the headlines that we heard from the outreach process. And I think they're all really important concepts and concerns that we've been working with as we've conceived this plan. So I want to start by talking just about a little bit of regional context and opportunities before I get into the details of the plan. You can see here, and you saw this slide already, that half of this land is kind of up in the mountains, covering these canyons, and then it drapes down over the future Mountain View corridor and then touches existing communities. And we heard a lot from residents of the community as to what's important to them. And so we're mindful of that, and I'll try to point that out in the plan. But we're also aware of UDOT's investment in the transportation issues that the city has and how that's going to be alleviated. And we've been studying these ourselves too, and have a sense of, you know, what impact does the project have over the time frame of the project. And so part of what we're trying to think through now is how do we set up the land uses and the plan to actually create local destinations within the community so that all of the traffic isn't being, all the day trips aren't necessarily going into the city, but how do we capture some of that locally? As I start to look at some of the distances here in the plan, just as a frame of reference from the Sitla property boundary to the future town center in Saratoga Springs, that's 3.5 miles. And when you
Real
think
quick, I'm sorry. What was your name? I'm sorry, I didn't write it down.
Stephen James.
Stephen, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
You put up there, since it's a work session,
Yeah.
okay, so you put up there the UDOT's investment. I want you to be aware of the city's also making significant investment in transportation
Yep.
over the next 2 to 3 years that you may not
That's
have
part-
captured in your
Yeah.
information. Just so you know, there's more
Yes. We understand.
transportation infrastructure coming in that's not just UDOT. The city's also making a big investment.
Yeah, and I understand from staff that this priority one, this extension of Mountain View corridor, was a city investment. And as we were doing our study onto the transportation plan, we recognized that the decision you made is exactly the right decision to make in terms of the first priority. And so we were
And
glad to hear
that's already in, right? That priority one's already in. I'm talking about new investment over the next 3 years, so.
Great. And we recognize that is a necessary investment and will serve the residents of the city. So my apologies for not bringing that
No,
up.
that's fine. I wanted you to be aware
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that's happening.
So as we look at the distance between the Sitla land and the future downtown at 3.5 miles, to give you a sense of scale, that's like from the University of Utah to I-15. Or it's from, downtown Provo to, University Mall. It's a really long distance. And when you start to think about cities that are completely built out, there's lots of commercial or neighborhood-specific destinations in that amount of distance. And so what we're when we look at the general plan, we see that you have village centers or neighborhood commercial in that plan. And so we're thinking through how do we actually get that to happen in a plan like this. We agree with what's in the plan, and we're beginning to formulate points of view about how do you get that to succeed along that Mountain View corridor. Another idea that we want to posit and just throw out there is that there's an opportunity in this project to set up some additional regional active transportation links. Thinking about that mountain range, what if, back into the what if we set up the Bonneville Shoreline Trail system and began to propagate from this project all the way around the mountain? How do we connect a system like that into your downtown, down to the Utah Lake? And so this is a part of what we're thinking about also in the plan. And then one other sort of regional thinking is right now it's just that lower black line that's built, Redwood Road, and you can see how all the communities require Redwood Road to get in and out. We know that Foothill has been extended up to Lariat, but this north-south transportation issue is a real concern. And so the red line is in your general plan as a collector street. And then we're proposing another quasi-collector or connector street that's even higher on the mountain. And a few reasons for this is that it creates redundancy in the system, but it also sets this kind of high road through the community. And think about other cities that are built on a hillside. Think about Bountiful, like Bountiful Boulevard, kind of up by the Bountiful Temple. It's that sort of really high view, or 11th Avenue in Salt Lake, or even Wasatch Boulevard through Salt Lake County. We envision this as that kind of road where it creates access to the mountains. So with this context in mind, I just want to talk a little bit about this site specifically, and Troy touched on it a bit, but we believe that the solution or the concept that we're proposing is actually rooted in this site, and we're trying to make something very much of this place. So when we look at the what's happening on this site right now, there are a few quarries. There's one up in a canyon, Lock Canyon, and there's the clay pits. There's the construction waste dump that's been noted. There are all these. There's the power line corridor. There's also all these erosion pathways coming down through the alluvial fan, and we recognize that that's created some flooding challenges. And as we look at this site, it seems like a lot of the impacts there, a bit of a retool is needed. If we were to sort of work around all those erosion sites, we would just continue to, I think, have some pretty serious flooding challenges and flash flooding issues through the broader site. So part of what we're thinking about is how do we actually aggregate impacts, and how does this project become a project that helps alleviate this wildlands-urban interface issue? How do we create access to the mountainsides, as well as how do we mitigate the impacts of flooding and runoff from the scar, the burn scar? And so when we think about the site, I think it's this Bonneville Shoreline Trail idea of creating this, what we're calling a greenway. Perhaps that's a paved asphalt trail that sort of sits at the toe of slope and creates this public access park corridor. And part of the solution, I'll show you some images of this a little later, it begins to pick up all the flooding, and it begins to capture it in debris basins, stormwater detention basins, channel it into the storm sewer system in sort of a metered outflow manner. But it also becomes a system that can be used for mountainside access. So part of this vision too is not to sell land up into the mountains, but to actually leave that as public and create a strong parkway system that connects down through as a part of this sort of community framework that connects down to existing neighborhoods. So it's bringing parkway bringing greenways, bringing parks, bringing trails down to the existing neighborhoods. And so when we talk about the community as a mountainside regional park, we view the whole community as a mountainside regional park. And so when we begin to lay this idea of how do we capture the floods, how do we channel it down swales and greenways into detention basins that ultimately is metered out into the city storm sewer system, and we begin to layer that over the city's general plan, it kind of looks like this. So when we look at the city's general plan, you can see the Mountain View corridor alignments there. You can see the red boxes are the community commercial. And then there are the housing land uses there, the low density residential and the rural density residential, which is in your general plan. So with this in mind is sort of a context of like, how do we solve this sort of problem of flooding and fire and all that? And these other questions, we've started to create these guiding principles, and I think this was shared with you the other day. What are the types of things that we think ought to sort of govern the development here? So understanding if we're on point on the guiding principles would really be helpful, because that really does guide the way we think about what we do. So a prioritization of these things would be important. So let's talk a little bit about the community frameworks now. So this starts to layer on the master plan thinking. The first topic that we have here is transportation. So I think one key point in your general plan and your transportation master plan is this idea of creating a connected street network. We believe that creating redundancy allows us to distribute impacts across a larger area as opposed to aggregate them into large arterials. Generally, when you aggregate impacts or you have larger streets, you get failure at the intersections, right? You're waiting forever to turn left. And so by distributing the transportation network into smaller streets with more intersections, you tend to have less impact anywhere. So our development pattern doesn't tend to be a dead-end development pattern, but everything connects through. And then we layer on a connected street network with path networks and trails. And what it does is it creates environments that are actually more friendly for pedestrians and cyclists and those that would use other modes. It's transit supporting. It's a transit supporting development pattern, because when you develop through a typical arterial collector system, it's just as easy to come and go through the garage door as it is the front door. And when we develop, we try to create mode equity so that people actually have a choice, that it's just as easy to walk or bike as it is to drive. Now, this is certainly impacted by, well, where's your trip? Where's your work, right? But there are a lot of other types of trips that we would normally take, like a trip to school or a trip to a grocery store or a trip to a park or a church. Those sort of local types of trips, we ought to be able to handle without people having to get in cars. And then the idea here too is that we view this community pattern as has an ability to absorb the impacts of neighboring communities. So we would develop this in such a way that people wouldn't reject neighbors coming in, because we need to develop this so that people can come through the community and have access to the three canyons. And I'll talk a little bit about what we want to put in these three canyons and how it becomes a regional amenity. So you can see there are some alignments that still aren't worked out. For example, Lariat, there's some grade challenges. How do you get off Lariat up into the hills? And I think we need to work together with staff to figure out where those alignments would really go. But you can see how the open space network and the street network work together, and how some of these detention basins in red, or debris basins to hold the floods, happen up high. Now, the next slide starts to talk a little bit about the three canyons. The three that are of most interest to us right now are Burnt Canyon, which is incredible. I don't know if any of you have actually walked up there, up on some of those hills. What's really interesting is this cool knoll that has this panoramic view of Saratoga. You have these views to the north. They pan all the way across Utah Valley, and then you can also see into the south. So as we think about Burnt Canyon, we see it as this opportunity to create some sort of mountainside retreat, a great place for families to come and get up high. You think about what's happening in Mill Creek Canyon or even up City Creek Canyon. There are like picnic sites and things for families, places where you can have family reunions. And so it could be kind of neat to have some of these sites up actually on that knoll where, and that's where that image on that first slide of that pavilion, with people kind of looking over the mountains. Well, that's an actual 3D scan of the whole valley and an actual rendering of that topography and geography. It can be pretty neat. Lot Canyon is interesting. There's a lot of mining going up there, so there's going to have to be some reclamation. But I think it would be a great place, whereas Burnt Canyon focuses on families, maybe mountain biking, recreation, leisure, fitness, maybe even a reception center that could help, provide places who are married just down the street to come up into the hills to have a reception. Lot Canyon is something that could be an interesting, horse stables or an equestrian trail head. And then lastly, Israel Canyon is a great place to place, trailhead for OHVs. Try to find a way to take the target practice that's happening out there and aggregate it into a setting where we know that stray bullets and arrows won't end up in the wrong spot. The idea of the OHV use and the rifle ranges and things like that are really important in the community meeting to people. There's this real view that, this is what we have now. If you do anything there, don't displace this because this is what we enjoy. And so what we're trying to do is figure out how to take what is really on private land and actually make it public. So that's the intent, I think, with these three canyons, and that's why we've been referring to the project as Three Canyons. And we see that these canyons are really accessible to everyone, and that's something that we would appreciate your feedback on too. I know, sometimes it just becomes a de facto HOA thing, but we're really thinking about what role this might play in the future of the city. Could it actually become Three Canyons Regional Park? Or is it an HOA? I mean, I think, we could go either way, and we're interested in, could this fit the bill for the city? I didn't advance a slide when I thought I had. So that's an example of the, conceptual trail network. I know there have been some mountain biking trail studies that you really kind of have to get on the ground and to design, build that stuff. But this speaks to intent. But you can also see that how the trails begin to drip down through this parkway system and connect into the neighboring communities. I mean, we had some people say, "Hey, I want to be able to get on my bike and get up there." It's like, well, yeah, yeah, you would, I would, who wouldn't? So how do we make sure that we're actually improving the nature of the experience and the access through development? And then when we start to think about land use, this is how this plugs in. And we've started to think about certain place types within the plan. So when you think about the light green areas, those represent what we're calling the mountainside estates. I think one of the first things we heard from the city was, we want there to be an opportunity for big lots up on the hill. And so what we're showing you today is big lots up on the hill, and we'll show you some examples of what that'll actually look and feel like. And then the other concern is we need to make sure that we're matching across the property lines where existing development happens. So when you see the green area, it's really the light green is where we're either matching or putting the large lot development. And so, those are mostly third-acre lots along the edge, and we'll show you a sample lotting plan too, so you get a sense of the way we work. Because we just don't sell entitled land and sell it. We actually implement lot by lot. We review house by house, and we curate and script what the ultimate experience would be. We actually are an internal design team, and we manage this process. Much of what we do has not been imposed on us by other cities in which we work. It's what we do because we like making that kind of place. The area with the white hatch would be those, yeah, okay.
I do want this to be a little bit more back and forth too, but what you just stated there, I don't think that maybe people grasp that as much as that what that really means. And I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never heard a developer say that before, a land developer. And that's different than just a home builder, because home builders will just sell lots off. And even my own community has multiple different builders. We had one vision when they came in and had the conversation. We had these types of conversations, and then they just sell off huge swaths of land and then just let that developer. And we've even had developers come in and apologize and say, when we sold it off, our contract wasn't quite perfect enough, and they built a subpar home in their development and their part, and we regret it. But what you're actually saying, this is huge, where you are going to be developing, building these homes lot by lot, looking at everything to make sure that there is symmetry, there is a design, there is a master plan. And I've always wished, in my experience, I've always wished for that. And I sort of thought some of the land that is north of you, we were going to see that, but it hasn't been the case. It's a sell off big chunk, sell off big chunk. And I think that's probably one reason why you liked them, why the Sitla Land Group liked the Larry H. Miller Group, the real estate arm, because of that. And I think because you also, your reputation is online, because you're going from when your land to now developed, and so you don't want it to become congested and ugly and horrible, and then it would give you a bad name, you get a lot of complaints. And so I just appreciate, I love the Three Canyon name too, by the way. I think that that should be the name of the whole development. I think that that is fantastic, and you can have the different names of the communities named based off their canyon. I think that's fantastic. I love the fact that you're looking at integrating the entire community to that. And I appreciate the sign that's here in the room, but I really want to point out, this is solving this problem. This is a transportation corridor that's bringing this through. Right now, all that's planned is Mountain View Corridor, which is coming. This development, whether it's Larry H. Miller Group or someone, this is going to get developed. Like, this is all the way south, all the way along, there's going to be 130,000 people in the city of Saratoga Springs. So to have more north-south roads is very appreciative. And I also appreciate the fact that you're looking to have access and maybe even have some shooting and things up there. I would love to have more control. Not one fire in our foothills has been caused by fireworks. It's always been exploding targets. The big mudslides that we had was exploding targets, not from a Saratoga Springs resident, I will point that out, came in, burned half the mountain down, and then we had a 40-year storm 7 days later. It was the worst time. You can't lay seed, you can't do anything to try and prevent that. And we had the big mudslides that came in. Something like this is a break. If this would have been in place with the debris basins above, there would never have been a mudslide, even with the fire on the mountain. I was impacted directly. I had to evacuate my home when that fire came through. It was very personal. It was something that I definitely experienced myself. And so I think that the thoughtfulness, this is all concept and nature, we're having conversations, but I just really appreciate this. And one of the things that I want to say, and this will be the last thing I really say today, because I want to hear from planning commissioners and I want to hear from others as well, is that we need to work together and we need to stop working opposite each other. When it comes to the legislature, let's work together. Let's go and say, here's how cities and developers can work amazingly well, and here are some great standards and processes that we can put in place. Can you imagine how powerful that would be when you go up to a legislature and you have one of the largest development companies now in the state of Utah, Utah-based, and one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing city in the state, with our data, our information, your passion, your vision, we can actually do things that can protect not only Saratoga Springs and your development, but so many cities around the state. that kind of cooperation is what's been lacking, and that's why you hear a lot of fighting between developers and city councils and mayors, and you have mayors who are trying to impeach, and I mean, all these different things because there's been this animosity. I really think we have an opportunity here to do something differently. And I look forward to being able to work with you and not against you because this is coming, and I would rather do it in a way that is positive and productive and effective. And I think that we will be able to do that if we work together. And so, so those are like my main points. I mean, I have different other thoughts as well. I think that the base camp thing is a fantastic idea, and I think we can work together, and maybe we can figure out something that can make that really be an amenity that's, I mean, I always look at Aspen, what is it called? Up in American Fork Canyon. Aspen Grove, I think it's called. That is an amazing amenity that has created so much connectivity, family, community. It just has been an amazing asset to the east side, and we have nothing like that on the west side. And then last, the dirt bike trails connecting into the Eagle Mountain network. Eagle Mountain, I will give them credit. They have done better than we have when it comes to their mountain biking and their trails through their hills. And it would be amazing as this will be a good component where we can connect into that and really create. And we have one of the best mountain bike teams, Westlake High School, and they have to go to Eagle Mountain to train more. They really can't train as much in Saratoga Springs. So I'm excited for the vision and thinking through these things and long term. And then last but not least, 3 units per acre. Your neighboring communities have higher densities than 3 units per acre. So you're actually less than. And so I think that people sometimes when they see big numbers like 3,000, they need to make sure they look at the big picture and say, wait a minute, that's just because it's a big amount of acreage that's being covered here, but 3 units per acre. And I would ask every day for a developer to come in and offer me 3 units per acre. Because the last 3 years, I haven't had many come in for less than 9. So thank you very much. And turn the time back to Mayor and them and whoever else might want to talk.
Councilman, if I can, I really appreciate your comments. And you hit the nail on the head. That is exactly why the trust chose this team, is because they don't look at it as just a mass building project. Steve and his team do visualize lot per lot. How are even the grade changes between those lots? How has it worked for the walkways, the pedestrian levels, the street level? Down, I mean, from a master plan of this down to the individual lot, that's what they design, that's what they build. And that's why we're really excited to have them as a partner. And I appreciate your comments.
So I just have a question. The dotted white line that kind of goes around the perimeter, is that the 200 acre, I mean, everything green is going to be developed, but outside that, is that part of the 200 undeveloped land?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Yep, the whole thing is 1,200 acres.
Right. And there's 1,000.
And there's land that's developable that we're not actually putting houses on because it becomes that park. And we think it's kind of incredible that this could be the first place in the state that actually didn't have trouble extending the Bonneville Shoreline Trail across because that's normally privatized. I mean, in the Mill Creek area, they had to get Congress to sign some crazy thing a few years back just to connect the Mill Creek canyons to the rest of the system. And why don't we actually do that up front? And this could be a pattern for every sequential development along the mountains. We could set up a framework that actually delivers this, not just in this project, but along the whole mountain range. So we're trying to think about how to plant a seed that can turn into something that's much greater than what we do alone project. And it could really create a spectacular outdoor recreation type of environment for a city that no one else enjoys.
Okay. Councilman Carn?
Thank you. I appreciate the comments by my peers. And I think it's important to call out for the public in the room and the 2 people online watching that this is a work session. There's not an application, and that questions that we ask tonight and comments are us learning about this. It's not a support or a disapproval, right? It's our job to learn more about this and provide feedback. And so, you know, I see some amenities that I really like. I'm not a horse guy, so I don't, you know, whatever you want to do there. But I think the mountain biking area, what is that called?
The base
Canyon,
camp,
that's the
Burnt Canyon Base
is that
Camp.
called Burnt Canyon, or did you call it that because of the fire?
It's called Burnt Canyon.
It's always been called that? I've been here over 20 years, I've never heard that. It's interesting.
That's what is on the map.
Yeah, okay. People what? I mean, that's kind of where the dump fire
There's
was.
the whole mountain.
Yeah. Anyways, you know, and I agree with Councilman McComber. You know, this does fit into our master transportation plan, which I know a lot of people don't look at. One thing I did see on one of your versions here that you're calling Mountain View Corridor Foothill south of Lariat, and I think it's important that we maintain that name, just so you know. Mountain View Corridor all the way to the end of the city and not bring it back down to Foothill.
We
We'll ma-
renamed our frontage roads
Yeah.
to Mountain View.
Okay,
So that's the confusion.
That's just
we'll,
FYI.
we'll update that.
Foothill even in the center.
Right.
But we renamed that road to Mountain View, and then there's the Mountain View Corridor Freeway, and then there's the frontage road Mountain View.
Gotcha.
So in your image here, and it's not on my screen anymore, your white thatched area that you say no attached, you're saying that's all single-family product, no
Yeah.
attached housing.
We've heard a recommendation that no attached housing ought to go east of Mountain View Corridor.
But you even have it west of Mountain View in some areas.
Well, especially along the Mountain View Corridor, that's where.
And one question I had on a previous slide, you had the community commercial at the top of Grandview, I believe it was, where there's a current dump? Is that developable land once that's filled in? I don't know if that is.
This is what's in your community plan.
I know. I guess I'm asking our city engineer. Can that be developed once it's filled in? Or is that non-developable land? Because if our plan shows it there, but I don't know if that's right.
Anything for the right amount of money, but it's probably possible to develop there.
Okay.
We would plan to develop it into a park.
So,
Chris, if I could, real quickly,
Yeah.
sometimes I think when we do master plans and general plans and things like that, we look at a flat surface and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool? But there's not a lot of the background research that's done to say, hey,
Okay.
could it sustain it? It's an idea, it's a concept. General plans change over time.
Yeah.
And so that's part of that concept and conversation.
so the red box is there because our general plan has a circle there saying commercial, but that
But it could be a
can
park.
shift.
But it could be a park.
Right.
I think you see program commercial where we knew there was going to be major intersections of large collector roads.
Yep.
and highways and other collector roads. So it was a very high level, we never looked at the topography
Or what's sitting there today.
so.
Yeah,
Now,
okay.
we've seen that there is a portion of that site that actually hasn't been impacted. So on this drawing, the orange piece right next to the big green park, there is a place where you could put commercial areas right off that
And I think it's also important to know when Councilman Conver talks about 3 acre, that doesn't mean there's no density
Right.
in this project.
It averages out.
It averages out, right. So if you've got a whole area of 1 acre lots or half acre lots, you could have an area of 8 units an acre, right? Townhomes or whatever.
I guess
You average it out across the
to that
development
question,
land.
is that 3 units per acre over the entire project? Or 3 units
Developable.
per acre over developable?
It's over all the land that isn't 30% slope or more.
He did over the 1,000.
And I think, obviously, I think when there's an application, the applicant's opinion of developable land and the city's opinion of developable land could be different, and we'd have to have an application to have that conversation.
Correct.
Oop, I don't know what happened here.
Okay. Councilwoman Barton?
I just want to reiterate, we're past a little bit, but how rare and how lucky it is that we have land developers that are wanting to develop this. And I know Michael just said that, but I wanted to reiterate that because that's a big deal. And that's going to make a world of difference in a property that's like this, that's this big, and has all these amenities that we could have not every home builder is going to come in and do that, right? And they're not going to offer that. So the fact that we have land developers and a company like Larry H. Miller that's willing to come in and, like Chris was saying, who knows what they're going to be able to make work there, that's willing to come in here and develop the land and not just build homes, that's huge. And again, I'll probably say more in the end, but I just really appreciate you guys being willing to come in and even like how creative you've been with what you can do for this and do for our residents. I think we are lacking, not that sounds bad when I say lacking, but we are lacking a little bit in amenities in Saratoga Springs because we have, geographically, we're really weird, right? And so to be able to come in and be able to say, hey, I think we can make this work and we can offer this and we can bring this to your citizens, I think is huge. And I really appreciate that as well. Again, it's hard here. We have hills, we have a lake, we have this, we have that, right? And so I just wanted to say that I think that's it is rare. We know that already, but we're lucky that we have land developers that are willing to come look at the big picture and not just say, hey, we're going to throw up a gazillion units here because that makes us money, but we want to bring something to Saratoga as well. So thank you.
Councilwoman, if I can, just expanding on your point, that's, again, going back to why we selected this partner. The trust, we're a long-term trust. We're going to be here forever. We're patient. We don't like to push products before they're ready. And I think Larry H. Miller and our visions for this property have matched up really well because we can be patient. We're not forcing them to develop on any specific timeline. They're going to develop the property as it makes sense. So I'm going to turn some time back over to Stephen to let him walk you through the
We got a
project.
whole lot of questions. I'm trying to get through them one at a time as they come up. We have our city manager really quick.
Just a clarifying question, are you attributing density to basically the mine area where there's that clay pit and are you attributing density to that acreage as well?
We intend to develop that area.
Okay.
And can I add just a little bit? Planning has looked at the first submittal. So the acreage that's being mentioned, we don't have anything yet, so we just went off of our city maps. So we'll have to get some more information from them to verify that. We don't have that information. Haven't seen it. But when they come up with that, and I'm just talking about city code. That's what planners do, right? We talk about city code. So we, in the code, wouldn't normally count drainage channels. And then there's, possibly up for discussion whether or not Mountain View Corridor would get a density credit or not. And then also, as Mark mentioned, the pit and the dump and how those factor in. We do have all the trails you're seeing here, this is roads, but on the other one that showed trails, all of those are also on our Trails Master Plan. So those are something that the city would definitely require. I'm glad that the applicants, incorporating the Trails Master Plan, but those are also required.
I think we're providing more than what would be required in your master plan by about 80%.
Okay. Commissioner Mangum, Karn, I don't know who pushed the button.
Yeah, it was me. So thanks for all the information so far. I share a lot of the comments that were made by others. My three big concerns are the safety, the traffic, and the schools. My kids go to schools that have way too many kids there that can't even sit. I think you've addressed some of the safety issues on flooding with what you've proposed, which is great. I really like that. And I've got several questions. So on the traffic side, I think Councilmember McComber talked about the north-south connector, but it looks like that really just addresses the north-south connection issue for the people in this neighborhood. And then it just spills them out into the same problems in the rest of the city. Does it do anything for the rest of the issues we already have in the city of traffic besides helping these people get to the rest of the city?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that
Yeah,
now?
please.
Okay. So a few different approaches on the traffic side. So one thing that we heard clearly from staff is they don't want people living in this community flowing down a Redwood Road. So when you look at the map, you see on the bottom left corner, which is the southeast corner of the map, we deliberately aren't connecting into the existing collector system, but we have this loop road that actually allows those communities to connect in to the Mountain View Corridor system. So suddenly you have redundancy between Redwood Road and the Mountain View Corridor. And in addition to that, there's another layer of road, which is the Bonneville Parkway.
That's the elevated parkway you're
The
talking.
Bonneville, and then the elevated, which we're calling Skyline. So the question that we would have for you is we can create that continuity through our plan. The question is, can we work together to extend it further north? So we have aligned with the Brixton project on Bonneville. The question is, where do we take Skyline? Is there an opportunity to wrap it around Brixton and then loop it to the north so it can do exactly this? And then the question is, what happens further south? So that's where the collaboration comes, or we offer it up, and then you as a city figure out how to do it. And so I think that's true also for the trail systems. How do we not keep these inside this project only? How do we connect further into the city? We can only influence and impact what happens within the boundary of the project, but we think there's value in that sort of regional scale thinking.
Okay, so you're thinking it provides a benefit because it gets people to Mountain View Corridor and off of Redwood?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it also can get people up to Bonneville Boulevard. So there are layers and redundancy to the system. So if you have an accident or traffic in one, another outlet, right? Whereas now, further south of Lariat, you just have Redwood. Yeah.
Okay, so I have just a couple other questions. On the density, so I want to make sure I understand what you're saying on density. I heard you say an average of 0.3 acres, not on the full 1,200 and change, on the 1,000 that you're calling buildable. Then I heard you say the largest lots would be 0.3 acres.
Largest lots are over an acre.
Over an acre, okay, I heard that wrong. So you'll
The
have
smallest lots next to adjoining neighborhoods are a third acre.
Okay, so some lots maybe on the mountainside are an acre because they've got a lot more slope probably as well.
No, because we're not building in the slope area. We're actually pulling them below the slope and just making big lots.
Okay, maybe some slope, but not 30% slope.
No, it'll be 15, maybe 12 to 15 great walkout basement lots.
What do you envision the biggest density?
Right now in our plan, let me flip here because this kind of speaks a little bit to what does this all mean? So when you look at this plan, and this is just an example, we have to actually go all the way to the end game and pull back for the way this zone is written. We have to understand, well, what could it be? And as we begin to think about amenities and how this would work, you kind of have to know, is it going to work? So we've been testing. So what this diagram means, if you look at the list on the right, you'll see a range of lot types. They range from 1 acre to half acre to third acre, all the way. So we're looking to find sort of a place for a first-time home buyer to go, as well as the person who's got millions to spend. And what we're really good at is actually mixing them all together in such a way that the market doesn't reject it. Because design really does matter. And so we really care, and design becomes the equalizer. And a matter of fact, in projects that we're working on, we end up selling really small lots for multi-million dollars because some people don't want a lot of land, but they want good design. But what it shows is that up along the mountain, you have the 1 acre lots, half acre lots, and then you can see the green and blue sort of wrapping around the property edges. And then there's this sort of core area in the middle on this diagram, which is kind of like there's some duplexes and triplexes. And we're thinking about them through the lens of how do you get those to read like mansions opposed to row homes. And so that yellow area in this map are every product type between large lot and small single-family lots and fee simple duplexes and triplexes. Now, when you get to the orange areas, that's where the density would go up because you want to actually put people where they can walk to services and amenities. So those would be places like Village Center. So there might be, near the base camp, the opportunity to have some, short-term stay. I don't know. If you're doing a wedding reception, you have people in town, maybe there's a reason to have a little place to stay right up there. The Village Center, which is to the, the left of the diagram is where we'd bring in neighborhood commercial. And so there we would, in places like that, that would allow a stacked flat. So that's kind of how this works and how you would read this diagram then, right? So the red we're showing is mixed use. The oranges, the browns are 2 and 3 unit mansion homes, duplexes, triplexes. And then you get into cottages. So we're sort of designating this as attached, small lot, medium lot, large lot, and estate lot. And then each of those lot designations would get a range of, housing types. And when we do a project, we'll interview upwards of a dozen builders and vet their designs, and we'll select them based on criteria, and we'll continue to hammer in what their product has to do. So we're hoping to invent something really uniquely Saratoga here. As we look at the block size and have studied it, we've discovered that a 240-foot block gets us 120-foot deep lots, which means that we're getting about a story a fall across each half-block section. So every home kind of fits with the perfect walkout basement. We're looking at how to manage the height of the home on the downhill side so that everyone above gets peak overviews. We're examining how that works on the side streets. How do we create paseos and passages? And then weave it all together. And we found that when we actually take large lot and small lot, and what you see here on this diagram is a transition, sort of a crescendo from low intensity to higher intensity. It's what allows the differentiation to happen. You get a sense of place because it's not all the same everywhere. Yeah. And then the dark elements that are not in that village center are kind of sprinkled like confetti over the site. They're just sort of moments where we want some building scale. And so we're not creating big projects of attached housing. We're creating clusters at the village center, but everywhere else it's kind of sprinkled in at key points. And because of the way we develop, we have all of these product types in every phase of development. So we don't just chunk off a piece and say, okay, that's this units per acre and there are 1 or 2 builders in there. It's not how we work.
Really quick, I see how you've got stuff interacting and, you've done good looping around that.
Okay.
When you talked about the alluvial fans and the water and the drainage basins, in your plan, because like I said, we didn't get much of a packet in here.
Okay.
What is your plans to integrate with the gravel pit? Because I meet with Lehigh's Mayor a lot and Draper's, and that is a nightmare for both of them.
Yeah.
And this small pit's only started. It's got 70 acres of a pit to start. What's your interaction with that to kind of mitigate those hazards? I know it's outside of your scope, but the dust storm is still in your city.
Yep. Well, we would like to find a way to acquire it, but that's something we haven't done yet. But we don't want trucks going through the project. I mean,
well, it's the trucks, it's the chipped windows, it's the dust. I mean, just talking with those 2 mayors and what they've dealt with, and some of them South County, that's just a concern as we're building nice lots, and what you're doing that's probably more of a concern than some of the drainage that we already know how to fix.
We agree it's a concern, and we're thinking through what to do about it.
Okay.
So we know that has to be solved as a part of this concept.
Perfect. Sorry to interrupt.
You're good.
Okay. If you're done.
I had a couple others, if that's
perfect.
Okay. One of my other concerns was the school issue that we have. It's a big problem, and we've got the school district split coming up. Just maybe for the city staff, so 3,066 units, does the city have a rule of thumb of how many kids that means? And how does this development coordinate with the school district to make sure we've appropriately planned for schools?
So we're showing 2 school sites on the project. So you can see the blue boxes, we're showing 2 churches, 2 meeting houses, and 2 schools.
The school district, to answer that, has a calculation, X number of home, X kids. We're not involved. The new school district will.
The school district has to be responsible for that.
But the school district's gonna have to work with them to buy that land.
Correct.
Develop
But
it,
what we have
and it's gotta be enough.
Ours is the transportation, the safe routes to and from the school. That's what we're responsible for.
We meet with the school districts frequently, so we would anticipate having a good relationship with them, helping them understand the pace of which housing comes on, the pace of which schools need to be brought on, best locations for walkability, bus routes, et cetera. But that's something that, we take a lot of pride in. And having that relationship really is an important thing for the residents.
I'm glad you brought up pace. That was another of my questions. You mentioned you had a timeline in mind. In your ideal world, what is the timeline of when this would be, over what period of time would it be developed?
That's a really good question. It's, 3,000 units is a lot of units. You're talking probably over 10 to 15 years worth of development to build this out and to do it the right way.
Okay, so 200 to 300 permits a year?
Mm-hmm.
How does that compare to what we do in the city now?
The big builders are moving much faster than that, so this would actually be somewhat of a slow roll compared to what other builders are doing. At the peak, a couple of years ago, I think we had about 2,600 active building permits at one given moment in time. And that was sustained, 2000, 2001, sustained for some time. Probably 150 building permits per month is what we've seen as we've been busier as a city. 6 to 9 month build, so, we were cycling through them quite quickly. 200 to 400 homes in a year from what we've seen with other large builders is actually very moderate or slow compared to what they're doing. So from a, I think to your question, what they're telling us is they would be very methodological in how they would be moving forward. And, if that ends up being the case, it would be a slower pace than what we've seen with our other big builders.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, sorry, and then we can go on, is you mentioned some of the community benefit features. And you had kind of tossed between whether those are public amenities or HOA parks. How would that work? If it was a city amenity, would that be developed and then donated back to the city, or? Like, what are the mechanics of that?
That has to be worked out through a contract.
When they actually make application.
They're their development agreement, that's when we would work through that.
Okay.
Like, for example, now, developments build trails systems, and then we then take over the surface, and they maintain the sides. That's a standard process, right, in the city of Saratoga Springs. So this would be something more unique. We would then talk to them and discover, is it gonna be a city, and then we're gonna contract with a private company to run that? Or are we gonna run it in the city, et cetera? So that would have to be all part of that conversation. Today was just the concept, it's just the big idea.
Councilmember, I would just add to that, we've established minimum standards. So it would, anything that the city would consider for being a community would have to meet at a minimum certain acreage sizes, certain amenity packages. We're not, we don't.
Open space requirements.
Yeah, we don't take anything generally under 5 acres, and generally we even prefer larger than that. We don't take anything that doesn't have sufficient amenities to meet a regional need, right? We no longer, I think early in the city, we did some pocket parks. It's been a long time since we've taken over anything that's not a regional facility. So it would have to meet the requirements of a regional type facility that meets the needs, not just serving this development, but it would have to be something that could meet the needs for the whole city, something like Patriot Park or Neptune Park or Shea Park of that. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I ask is that HOA amenities, different access, right, than a city amenity, so.
Well, and you can have hybrid situations in that particular case. So for example, perhaps the trail would be a city amenity, but the parks and things like that could be HOA maintained. So all of those are things that we would look at as we get further down the process. Again, this is a conceptual conversation of what it is, and I think the applicant has done a good job of trying to frame the questions that they're asking for the city of, what are your thoughts on these things? So again,
We have a large park in Harvest Hills that's a city park. We maintain it, but 95% of the people who use that park are people who live in Harvest Hills. But it is accessible and there's parking there. There's a zip line we put in recently, in recent years, to try and draw people in to that park. But it's not unprecedented for us to have a large park that's in an HOA area that we then maintain.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And we use this, and yeah, so it's in Harvest Hills.
But people can rent it, people can.
But anybody can rent their pavilion from the city, yeah.
Are you good, Commissioner? Okay. Appreciate everybody being patient. Commissioner Hill, you've been waiting a long time.
Well, thank you, because a lot of my questions have been answered and asked. First, I would just like to thank for the thoroughness of the discussion. You know, we talked about having kind of an open dialogue, and I think it's gotten to that. The first thing that I want to share from my perspective, I've seen a lot of land development in my life, and I truly appreciate the vision of the Utah Land Trust and what they're trying to accomplish and what you give back, and finding a partner that goes hand in glove with your principles. The Larry H. Miller having this vision that protects so much, and I'll share with you a little bit of what I'm talking about. About a year and a half ago, we've been working on a downtown master plan for quite a while. And as we were putting that together, we had a lot of dialogue that talked a little bit about what do we want to be known for in Saratoga Springs. We're new and we're growing so very fast. And we struggled, you know, in the downtown. What do we want to be known for? And we looked at some of the old historic things that people from years ago thought about us. But the thing that really hits me now is this recreation area that's going to preserve our view. And I had an opportunity a year ago to go to a conference down in Cedar City with APA. And part of that, we had conferences on recreation, trail biking, and all of those things that are happening down in southern Utah. And it's a long, tedious, expensive process to do it right. But they were not able to do it from the start. They've had to take little pieces and put it together. And so I listened with great intent of how they're doing that. What an exciting opportunity to start from scratch and build something that we could be known for, recreation in the mountains that protect the beauty of those mountains, because they're looking across the lake and, you know, I don't know that we want to see homes going way up and the glare that comes off of that. But for families to go, I'd love the thought that Saratoga Springs could be known for recreation in the northern part of the state. And instead of us going everywhere else because we don't have recreation, people are coming. We're taking the opportunity to provide for our citizens, but others. The other thing that, so again, thank you. And the very thoughts that you're looking very carefully at what that might look like. The other thing that I wanted to share is the thoughtfulness of a mixed-use community that gives more. It doesn't have as great of density as we're seeing coming all the way around us. And I think it's going to give us an opportunity to acquire a different type of neighborhood and people coming in. And we're taking the beauty and the value of that property and using it at the highest use. You know, you can go to Provo and Orem and you can see great views over Utah Lake, but there's no place to see it. Because homes, the density is so great that you lose the opportunity to see beauty. So let's come over to the Saratoga Springs side and be able to see the beauty of Utah Lake and that brings. Again, I know this is a process. Transportation, you know, whether we have this or not, it's going to be a problem until we address it. Until UDOT really understands we need to have east and west arterials coming through that are better than what we've got today. I think that really does it for me right now. I'm excited, but I do know that it's the beginning of a process. And the things that we talk about are going to be tweaked with the planning department. I have all the confidence in the planning department, ability to work and stay and do the things that we are going to be known for, we want to be. So thank you for your presentation so far.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Wilden?
Thank you. For the most part, a lot of this is the first time we're seeing it, so it's hard to formulate questions without looking at it beforehand. And this has been said before, so it's not really a question, more of a statement. I mean, the amenities are great, but when an actual application comes in, for me individually, I usually say 1 out of 6, but there's 13 of us here today? So 1 out of 13. If we back out the mayor, 1 out of 12, that will have input on it, but will be transportation. And we talked about that a little bit of, how do we get people in and out? And my primary concern is how do we get people in and out without significantly or materially impacting existing residents? And our representatives, specifically, Representative Moss and recently Senator Baldry in our area has done a phenomenal job to expedite UDOT roads for us. And I don't think as a city, we have much leeway to go and say, to our House Majority Leader, Moss, go get us more. I mean, we've kind of used that capital, at least in my opinion, as a city. And so if part of making the full connection is going to involve UDOT and funding there, that's going to need to be partnered by this group because we've leveraged about what all we can. We're committing, not I guess informally at this point, right, through our own working session, a lot of our own city funds, which Councilman Karn mentioned earlier, to existing city roads to fix problems here and now as soon as we can. So that limits what we can do. So I want to make sure it doesn't, and you don't have to answer this now, we'll have to address it with staff and stuff over time. But it can't just stop at your road, and then it can't be on the city to say, hey, go and figure out the rest. Because the existing residents, we can't ask them to pay for new development. But I think we can work it out, but it's going to need to be a partnership, not the city going in lobbying, because there's only so much lobbying that we have. And the mayor, he's been on MAG for those mountain land, whatever, association. I just call it MAG. I can tell you banking acronyms, but not government acronyms. MAG, and he's worked very well with them to divert, but their funding's limited in our influence there. So that's just, so my standpoint is going to be very focused on that. Amenities are great, but if we can't get people in and out without, with minimal impact or marginal impact to the existing residents, it would be hard to make it work, if that makes sense.
Understood.
Okay. And we have Commissioner Mann, Miles, whoever.
That better? Yes, I want to echo what Commissioner Hill mentioned. This is a very unique place. It's an opportunity I think we have to plan carefully and plan well. And so to maintain that safety, that uniqueness of Saratoga Springs, I think is interesting. It's kind of hard to see from my spot here. Is there a way we can get a copy of this PowerPoint, this presentation, that we can take a closer look at?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's in our pack. Yeah.
Just a one-page.
I'll put it in the packet.
Okay. Councilwoman Barton.
Just to respond a little bit to Plan Commissioner Miles, is that's why we're doing this, is for the big picture of the planning, right? Like, this is I was really passionate about this, as some of you might know, but for me, a project of this magnitude, and that's gonna not affect negatively, affect our residents, and I say, again, I'm using the wrong word there, because affect, it's not all gonna be negative, right? But something that of this magnitude that's coming in without the proper planning, without the proper discussion, I feel like is a big disservice to our residents. And so I felt this is where I think this is what needed to happen. Opinions from everybody, feedback from everybody, so they can bring something back that the residents are comfortable with, that we're comfortable with. And so I appreciate your comment, but yeah, this is part of that planning process, and I appreciate everybody coming to it, so.
And just to reiterate, I've done this for 15 years, and when we had 3,000 acres come into the middle of the city, when PLSLR and all the different organizations from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were coming in, we had community meetings, which you've done already, which you got the voice of, heard from the communities, which I appreciate you doing, which you don't have to do required by statute. It's something that you chose to do, which I think is very impressive. But this meeting here, we had like 12 of these types of meetings where we would go over ideas and have conversations, because like this can't be the last time. And this includes, when I say this includes the planning commissioners, we would go and we would have meetings. We would look at your maps and like the different drawings and the different housing types. I know you maybe had that in here, but I mean, we don't have the time to maybe get into that level of detail. But what I'm hoping is that this isn't just this one time. Like this type of impact to the community, we want to make sure our voice is being heard. We want to make sure that you're hearing it. And what we've had in terms of like, with the church's development, right, they've gone off and they chose to do it differently. They went off and sold off huge portions to different developers, and they've been disappointed and they've been happy as well. But this is different. So I think it's even more important that we continue to have a dialogue and a conversation. And as we work through with the city attorney and we work out all the details and all of that, that will get us to where I know there's been some things like, what's the density? What's the number? And I understand the passion. I am very passionate about that. I have never approved a high-density product that has not added value to the city of Saratoga Springs ever. And I never will. I was part of Prop 3. I was part of those. I was 6. I was a huge proponent of those. I held meetings on those. And I do not want a huge bunch of density in our city. This product actually is far less dense than what the district area plan with the church property has entitlements to. So I think we just need to have perspective. And I just want to make sure that, and to echo Councilmember Karn's point, this is concept, this is conversation, this is vision. And it's important for you. We wanted you to hear from us as a group. And I'm so appreciative of the questions, the comments. And if you have other comments, commissioners that maybe didn't have a chance to speak or aren't going to, send them emails. You can, as an individual, you can say, these are some of the thoughts that I had. Like, that is legal. You don't want to like form a group of 4 or 5 of you and then send a communication. That would be illegal. But you can share your thoughts. I mean, that's something that we will be doing is one-on-one, talking to you, no more than 2, to continue this conversation. But ultimately, with so much happening at the legislature right now, and I'm reiterating this because to me, this is the most important thing, we need to show that cities and developers can work together. For the residents, you think that you're frustrated? The state right now is trying to take all of the decisions away from us, and the state wants to be able to make all these decisions. And you know what the state wants? 10 units to the acre, 15 units to the acre. So we need to work with developers. If we don't work with them, then they're going to go to the legislature and they're going to lobby them, and they have the backing and the support because the legislature is extremely developer heavy. If you don't know the makeup of our legislature for a very long time was a bunch of lawyers and some doctors. It's like 75% developers who are sitting in elected office. And so I want to work with you. I want to partner with you, and let's show the state that they don't need to take this over, that keeping it as local as possible so that we can hear from residents. You know what, and I appreciate your signs because we didn't have a pulpit today, and I didn't have a problem with those. I appreciate those, and I took notes on every one that was written because I agree with them. But what we need to do is work together to make this an amazing product. And I really do believe we can. And then let's talk to the legislature and say, you know what, we think we can do this together on the local level, and we don't need to take this over because and I told this to you the other day too, I don't think you all want to be working with the state either because that bureaucracy is a nightmare and it'll become a huge problem for you. You won't even be able to do what you want to do. They'll be forcing you to do high density 10-unit apartment complexes because the Governor Cox thinks that everything needs to be apartment complexes right now in the state of Utah to solve our housing problem. I don't believe so. I believe there's like you said, a need across the board, all the different types of products that they're out there. And again, those of you who have never come to city council before, I am the hardest when it comes to developers. I am brutal when it comes to developers. When you come in, I'm going to be hard on you just like anyone else. I hold you to what you say. I hold you to the fire. I am a bulldog. People tease me of being a bulldog, but I'm fair. And I believe in compromise. And I think that's what we've lost in our country is the ability to compromise. And let's work together to make that happen. And thank you, Mayor, for those final comments.
Okay. Do you have more to share?
We could go all night. Why don't you tell us?
I'm sure, the pace we're going.
What
we
else
could
you would
tell
like
me.
to see?
I think this was a good start.
Yeah.
Is there something, what else would you like to hear from us that you can go forward? I mean, I know again, I hope there's more conversations because this will be back and forth, but I want it to be back and forth between us and you guys, not just individuals, right? So is there something else that you'd like from us? Is there something else you'd like to show us to be able to say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Because we want to be able to bring something back that.
Maybe we can just plant a seed, and whether we talk about it tonight or on another night, is fine with us. But as we've been thinking through some of this, we have come up against conflicts in policy where pulling off the vision might not be possible without a discussion about policy. As we think about how to deliver the Mount View Corridor road experience, we're trying to get creative to figure out, can we have 2 water tanks instead of 3, or 1 instead of 3, as a way to offset what that investment is in infrastructure. These are conversations that we would welcome and try to understand, how we deal with secondary water, for example. As we get into the mountainside and we think about, the impact of the quarry on the mountainside and the addition of water tanks and secondary water reservoirs that look like concrete bathtubs, we know that has a visual impact on trying to create that experience. And so these are the things that we're scratching our head a little bit in terms of how do we actually unlock some of the issues, because we want to be responsive.
Amazing staff who will be able to work with these things.
Right.
They do this all the time, reimbursement agreements. A huge portion of this road is not on your property, the Mountain View Corridor. But we need to have connectivity. It doesn't do any good to have Mountain View Corridor and the Mountain View Corridor, again, needs to connect, right? So reimbursement agreements, different things that we've done in the past for other developers, tanks-wise, you're oversizing a tank. We've helped pay for the difference. I mean, there's so many things. This staff, in my years, I've never seen. They are so respected across the state because they are so good. I mean, Jeremy left, and I was so mad, and when he came back, I was so glad because he is a genius when it comes to this type of stuff. Work with him and work through these types of solutions. And then the mayor will appoint 1 or 2 council members to work with you and work with staff to be liaisons so that you don't always have to be coming to a formal meeting.
Great.
And Jim is, Mayor Miller, I've just known him for a long time. He is fantastic at finding the right people who can work with you and coordinate with you, and he's a huge asset there.
So
To make sure, I know our policies, I know we have policies out there, but I just want to make sure staff, if you bring back to us also, if these guys are coming to you with something that's maybe conflicting with our policy, why is it conflicting, and is there something we can work with, right? So I don't want, for me, I just want to make sure there's still open discussion where they're coming back with something and you're like, oh, that's not our policy. Okay, so what is our policy and why doesn't it match?
And we've done that with every developer.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that that's clear as well when we're having our meetings or when they bring something back, hey, this is our,
It's going to have to be, just to Councilmember Comber's point, Jeremy's been designing our water systems and things for years, laying this out, planning this out for the future, longer than you've been looking at this property. So what he says is really going to weigh heavily, more so than it looks pretty. It's what's long-term. We're going through and we're retrofitting clay ponds, rubber lined ponds, back to concrete ponds for a reason, collapsible soils, different things like that. So I hear what you're saying, and I think to Councilwoman Barton's point, if there's an issue with policy or something, let's have that discussion. But to that point, work closely with our engineer because he has been designing this almost from the ground up. There's not many cities whose engineers can say, I was here at the beginning designing this.
He was even a consultant before you.
Before that. So, that's going to go, sorry, Mark, go for it.
No, thank you, Mayor. My point was, there's already been some talk, and some of the requests are things that we have many zones as we go up the hillside in order to preserve that. One of the early things that we've been talking about is their desire to leapfrog zones, which has operational inefficiencies associated with it. And so fundamentally, those are questions that ultimately we'll vet, but it will come down to you know, how flexible will the council actually be? Because in previous master planned communities, we've not allowed for engineering standards to be changed because of desires, you know, for flexibility in how they build their communities. And so obviously.
That's not a totally honest answer, because we've changed road cross sections, we've done a lot of things for developers, Mark.
And what we haven't done, though, is say, okay, not with our water zones. And so that's been one of those rubs that we've come to. And it's a conversation that we'll continue to have. However, you know, we understand what those challenges will be. We also have concerns, you know, in some of those regards. So please understand, we'll bring you the codes and we'll represent what those codes mean. Fundamentally, our recommendations would be to adhere to some of those standards instead of deviating from them for a variety of reasons. And as we get more information, as we get further down the road, we can explain those things. Sure.
I don't want like them coming to you and be like, oh, nope, we're not, that's not gonna be because this and this and that. I wanna make sure that we're brought into these conversations. So again, like, because there have been things that we've changed with roads, that kind of thing, where we that can be part of the conversation.
Well, and I think to your point, and it's an illustrative point that they pointed to earlier. Earlier, they talked about Skyline Drive or Skyline Drive along the top of their development, and where does it connect to? I think that's a great concept. Part of the challenge is their requests might be in conflict with the overall master planning for the remainder of the city. And so we're going to be balancing those and looking at those and wanting to make sure that we understand, and prior to you making those decisions, understand if you do this, then it will have this operational impact, or it will create these bottlenecks and things. And so, again, we're not trying to start with a no, but we're also not wanting to say we're going to fundamentally abandon the master plans that have been in place for decades now, simply to make it one tank easier for a developer. And so we feel like we need to balance that whole.
I think to Michael's point, we have changed it on roads. We went smaller, we went back to larger. That is not a mistake I'm willing to make on water and sewer. So just to be fair, it's going to weigh heavily on our engineer, his input coming back. Not 100%, but he's the expert that's been hired.
Mayor, can I
I want to
just,
make sure that we know of the asks, because I feel like we were very clear on some of the asks. And I want to make sure that we're clear on the asks, even though they might end up being a no. I just want to be I want to know what the asks are, right? Like, even if it's a, hey, this is what they're asking, this is what our policy, that kind of thing. And again, and some of it's because I'm new, right? And so I'm still learning all our policies and stuff like that. But for me, I just want it to be super clear, hey, this is what they're asking. I don't want it to be them asking, you guys telling them no, and then us not even hearing about it, because it doesn't, right, that kind of stuff. But
I will say, every applicant can bring forth anything that the
I wanna make
city's,
sure that
well, legally, you know, that happens I wouldn't say it happens all the time, but
I also feel like that
you
doesn't always
can,
happen.
well, that's the developer's choice if they didn't put it on the application with no recommendation from staff. So, like, I understand what you're saying, but I just want to be clear, that's always been available to everyone.
Okay. Really quick, we'll jump. Commissioner Mangum, Karn.
I just have one quick one. So let's say you go through the application process and there cannot be an agreement. And my question is for the gentleman from Sitla. If there can be no agreement to annex the land into the city to develop the property in this way, what is Sitla's next best alternative? You know, what would your plan for that be?
To speak frank, as I mentioned earlier, we're a long-term trust. And we do care very much about the community's involvement and what the community desires. So we have a vision that Larry H. Miller has helped us put together for this property. And, you know, there are certain density discussions, those types of things we've had with staff, disagreeing on what counts as developable property, what doesn't, et cetera. But I think we all understand that units add value, which that value can then go to improvements. If we can't get to a point where it makes financial sense for the trust to do this development, then we're prepared to sit on the property and not do it. And so that is what we would do. And we would look to make a revenue on the property in other ways, either continuing with the clay mines, continuing with the construction debris landfill, et cetera. the historic uses that have been on that property. And we would continue that until attitudes, policies, et cetera, change to make the property financially viable to the trust.
Okay.
So I don't know, I'm not saying that as a threat, it's really it's an option to the community, this is a vision that we feel very strongly about and feel very comfortable with, and would be a great asset to the community and meets our fiduciary responsibility. And if that can't happen, if we're not meeting our fiduciary responsibility, then I sit on the property for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever that has to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mayor, can I just say, again, we're excited about the opportunity, and I would just comment on the discussion that was just happening on policy changes and requests, and we're really pretty aware of the seriousness of water, sewer, transportation. We want to be helpful in solving problems. That's what makes this project so unique, is how often do you get a chance to take 1,200 acres and relook at general plans, look at transportation, advocate with UDOT, do these types of things, show the state that we can do these things together. If the city will just give us some grace as we go through a planning process, having looked at it not near as long as the engineers and planning and staff has, and we bring ideas that we think could work, and then we work to compromise on some of those, we are not afraid of being told no. We're not being afraid of saying, go try again. That's what we do every single day. But we do think that there's tremendous opportunity to look under and around every corner and every rock to try and find what makes these things viable. These types of solutions take millions and millions and millions of dollars. And if there's not an ability to come together to say, what if we moved it here or did it there, and it would free up this, this, and this, and that's okay if it's no because of this, this, and this, we're happy to continue to go back to the drawing board and look at this project in phases and planning opportunities and having a great discussion with staff. Boy, our intent would be at the end of this that everyone says, we love the way that happened. We love the communication. We love the way you did what you said you were going to do. And you're welcome to develop here anytime, because we want you to be, we just love that you did what you said you would do. And that frankly begins with having good, honest conversations, treating each other with respect, treating each other and respecting the roles that each of us play. And we know that as that happens, there's bumps in the road, but overall there's a successful project here. And so we just look forward to that type of honest involvement with each other.
Okay. Perfect.
To the public for coming. I just love the process and the democracy and how it works, and that you guys saw that there was a game. Again, you shared your signs, that kind of stuff. Like it's important for us to have you involved. And so thank you for coming, and I hope you're still involved in the process as we go forward. This is a huge impact, good or bad, right, on Saratoga Springs. And so how grateful are we that you guys came and you're here, even though, again, it wasn't public comments and stuff like that, but that you're here to support your city, I guess is a good way to put it. So thank you for coming out.
Yes, and please don't hesitate to hang around and chat after the meeting. Okay, do you guys have anything else you want during this work session?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you'll give us the whole deck so we can review that. If we need another work session after we have a formal application, we're more than happy to do that, joint or individual with the Planning Commission and Council.
Thank you.
Yes.
If we do another work session, if we could get the materials a little bit sooner, because it's really hard. I don't know why I'm looking at you, or you're on the commission, sorry. You just look like that's the beard, sorry, I'm totally looking at the wrong people. But you look good, whatever. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, if you would submit it a little bit earlier, because it's just hard to articulate, like even questions coming into it a little bit blind, so.
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that,